Abracadabra. That's a magic word everyone knows. It's a silly word, right? Some nonsense syllables you can say while you wave your wand to make something magic happen. Well, I recently learned that abracadabra is not a silly word at all. It derives etymologically from Hebrew, and it translates to "I will create as I speak." And I was shocked when I learned this, because it so perfectly describes what I want to do with my life, what I'm passionate about: writing and telling stories. Spoken word, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, these are all forms of storytelling, stringing together words to make something. They're acts of creation. They're acts of magic. Abracadabra. As we speak, we create. I've always wondered why we think about magic as something separate from our world, something imaginary and impossible. It's always seemed to me like magic is everywhere. I mean, we carry around rectangles in our pockets that let us talk to anyone we want, anywhere in the world at any time. You can explain the technology to me till the cows come home, it's still gonna feel like magic. It feels like time travel. It provokes a sense of wonder. And I can prove to you that words are magic too. Just think of any book you've read that has really affected you, that evokes a real emotion or made you feel empathy for a fictional character or constructed a world in your head. These things are acts of creation, the building of something very real from simple marks on a page. When I need to remind myself that words are magic, I just remember how enthralled I was as a kid by Harry Potter. I had all 7 books on audio, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I listened to each one no less than 40 times. And it's not just that I loved them, I was transported by them. When I listened, my head and heart were whisked away, blissfully spending hours in the corridors of Hogwarts. It was very, very real to me. When friends would come over, I wouldn't let them speak while the audiobook was playing. This is not a testament to my friendship skills, but it is a testament to the magic of story. So a string of words can create something very real. And as a writer, a stringer together of words, you can create what it is you choose. And we do this every day, even if we don't call it writing. We're always telling stories. Everyone has this magical ability. And a huge, important part of this magic ability is the power to tell our own story, to speak the narrative of your own existence. When you tell your story, when you say, "This is how it happened, this is how I felt," you are claiming agency over your own narrative. You are claiming power. If you want to see what I mean, try delivering a slam poem. I've never felt as powerful as when I did performance poetry. For 3 minutes, you command a room. You tell your story exactly as you want to, and the audience listens. The stage is yours. And this is an intoxicating feeling, partly because it's so rare to have this experience. How often do you tell your story to a room full of strangers and really have them listen to you? But this is also an especially rare experience for girls. Our society tells women and girls to be quiet, to be polite and demure, to avoid imposing or taking control of situations. We're taught to ask for permission, to make room for others to speak first. So when there's a chance to stand up and grab the microphone, we're often not the ones who do it. We're often not the ones who stand up and say, "My turn." But in spoken word, everyone can do this. I felt ablaze after my first poetry slam. For 3 minutes, I had been truly listened to. It felt radically new and exciting. It felt powerful. I felt powerful. Because this feeling of being listened to, it's huge, right? It's a feeling of being accepted, of validation and belief. And we live in a society that doesn't listen to everyone equally. Take, for example, the national epidemic of sexual assault on college campuses. According to a 2015 survey among the largest studies conducted on this issue, 23% of undergraduate women will experience assault before they graduate. Time and time again, these women come forward and tell their stories, which is a difficult and courageous act. And time again, their stories are not believed. These women are not listened to. In fact, 3/4 of assaults go unreported to authorities, and the main reason that women listed for not reporting was the knowledge that they wouldn't be believed. Their stories would not be listened to. This is one of the terrible consequences of living in a patriarchy, a world in which power is imbalanced along lines of sex and gender. Men's words, and more specifically the words of white and cisgendered men, are more often believed in mainstream society. Women have to fight for that belief, for that listening audience. I studied sociology in college, and in my freshman year Intro to Soc class, our professor told us that the definition of power is the ability to get others to act in your own best interest. And this is a really useful definition of power. Take the same example of sexual assault on college campuses. It is in the university's best interest to not believe these women. It is in the college's best interest to sweep these incidents under the rug, to not listen to their stories. It's not a personal vendetta against women on the part of college presidents. It's institutional self-protection. No school wants to be the first to admit that they have this problem. They fear that their reputation will be damaged, donations will decrease, admissions statistics will go down. So these institutions have processes in place to silence these women. They have a lack of punishment for perpetrators or poor reporting systems. They have systems in place to avoid losing their reputation. They have power, the ability to get us to act in their own best interest. So living in a patriarchy like we do, a system of power imbalances, we have to constantly apply this definition of power. Where do others get us to act in their own best interest? When we identify these places, we can apply resistance to them. We can counter them with our own personal power. And I find that when talking about personal power, we need an additional definition. The best definition I know for personal power is also the best definition I know for magic. Creating change from your will. It's the knowledge that we are co-creators of reality, that we can set our minds to something and create change. No, we can't get everything we want or make anything happen, but we always have a spark of agency. We can always reach within our depths and find some fight, some energy, some ability to change. We can enact our will to create something new. Another definition of magic is shifting consciousness, creating a new awareness or a new understanding of something. So if you can change one person's mind with your words, you're enacting your personal power, your magic. And how cool is it that the definition of personal power is also the definition of magic? So by using our will, our words, we can create change. When you tell your story repeatedly, refusing to be silenced, you expand the narratives that create and describe our world. The more women that come forward and tell their stories of sexual assault, the more it's widely accepted as a societal truth that this does happen. This is a real experience, a real epidemic, and it needs to be really addressed. It is horrifyingly unjust that these women are not always believed when they first come forward. Such is the nature of power imbalance. The problem is, we live in a society that does not always allow or expect women to be the storytellers. According to the 2011 documentary Misrepresentation, the amount of clout of women in clout positions in the media, including telecommunications, publishing, advertising, and entertainment, is about 3%. That means that 97% of the stories that you're told about our world are stories told by men. In the top 250 grossing films of 2015, women were 9% of directors and 11% of screenwriters. So 91% of the movies that most people saw last year literally came from the perspective of a male. Women were 12% of protagonists of the top films of 2014, and that number has gone down in recent years, not up. As the actress Gina Davis states, quote, "All of Hollywood is run on one assumption, that women will watch stories about men, but that men won't watch stories about women. It is a horrible indictment of our society if we assume that one half of the population is just not interested in the other half." The majority of the stories that you're told in the media are stories by and about men. And we internalize what it is we see and don't see in our media. So to ignore women's stories there sets a very dangerous precedent for how we treat women's stories in daily life. So a skewed fraction of the population is being listened to. This is a power imbalance. This is what we need to change. I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to men's stories, of course not. I'm saying we need to get to a place of balance, a place where everyone's stories are valued equally, are believed and validated. We get there step by step, story by story. So to tell your story is to work toward actual change. It's magic. I use stories every day to remind myself of my personal power. My favorite one is that I'm a witch. And it's real for me. It really is, because I make it real. It's the narrative through which I create and frame my existence. And the image of a witch, to me, is so richly imbued with female power that it reminds me every day to claim my own. It reminds me that I'm a co-creator of my own reality. No, I don't make everything myself, but I can always tap into my personal power. I can always tap into my magic. I can always speak and write, creating new understandings of myself and the world as I do so. A few years ago, I delivered a poem called Shrinking Women at the College Union's Poetry Slam Invitational. The poem is about the myriad pressures that women face surrounding body image. Women and girls are taught to feel immeasurable and intensely destructive pressures to constantly monitor and critique our bodies. It's debilitating. And I went through a long period of being obsessed with it. Obsessed with everything I ate or didn't eat, how much I weighed, and what my body looked like. Let me tell you, it was completely exhausting and zero fun. It kept me from thinking a lot of interesting thoughts or doing a lot of interesting things because my mind would always bounce back to my body obsession. And it's easy to feel shame when admitting this. I don't like to admit it. I feel embarrassed, like I was shallow or weak during those years. But I know now that I wasn't. I know now that this is a culturally enforced pressure targeted at women and girls. And this is another example of the power imbalance. Women are told in myriad subtle and not so subtle ways that our very worth is tied to our body. Men are told that their very worth is tied to their accomplishments and achievements. Want proof? Try comparing the covers of mainstream men's and women's magazines. The cover of every mainstream women's magazine tells us countless stories about how to get a slim, sexy body, lose 10 pounds fast. Men's magazines don't feature those stories. They show actors and explorers and entrepreneurs talking about their goals and projects and ideas. Women's photos are airbrushed beyond recognition. Men are featured with wrinkles, pores, and all. Women's entire perfectly toned bodies are predominantly shown on the cover photo. Men's magazines usually show just their faces. See the disconnect? Over and over, we are told the story that as women and girls, we are supposed to be obsessed with our bodies. That's the story that we're told. And to make matters worse, we're taught to feel embarrassed when we admit it. But when we don't talk about it, we are succumbing to the patriarchy's power. It is in their best interest, the best interest of the companies and institutions that benefit financially from women's self-doubt, when we keep silent. So instead of letting these systems enact power over us, we can choose to work our inner power, our magic, and speak openly about our experiences. That's how I felt when I delivered my poem, which was achingly vulnerable and made me and others in my life feel exposed. But it was worth it, because the overwhelming response I got from strangers all around the world was this: me too. I have struggled with this too. I have felt this too, and I haven't talked about it until now. And this response astounded me. So many women were going through what I'd gone through in silence. So many of us were going through it in isolation. What would happen if we all stood up and talked about it, if we told our own stories? Can you imagine the power that we'd unleash? This act of speech, it has enormous, far-reaching consequences. It creates a sudden electric current in the air, a shift that has the ability to change thoughts, behaviors, and lives. What is that if not magic? When I was first recovering from this body image obsession, I created a mantra that I'd use daily. When I began to feel anxious or guilty about my body, I would say out loud, "This is the shape that my body makes today." And it really helped. It emphasized that my body is an ever-changing thing, an active subject that makes a different shape every day of my life, not some passive object that's one static size. And the act of verbal repetition helped too. Because it was a memorized sentence, it became a reflex to say it when I needed to. When things got hard, I knew the words that I had to conjure up. This is the shape that my body makes today. And it had a real effect on my life, just like a magic spell. And this mantra, this magic spell, has taken me far. I co-launched a holistic feminism blog on which we write about body love, activism, and feature awesome women's writing and art. The blog is called The Shapes We Make, a version of the mantra that I created years ago. I took this destructive pressure, this destructive story that society told me, and eventually turned it into a form of my own personal power, a manifestation of what I believe in, a platform for change. To me, that is magic. If I want to leave you with any idea today, it's the knowledge that you have a library of magic spells at your fingertips. They come as books, stories, mantras, poems, speeches. You can use them to create new things, to understand new things. You can use them to escape, to comprehend, to feel. You can use them to make others listen, to affect others. You can use them to claim power, to frame your existence in completely new ways. You can use them to create anything you want. Your words are a vessel for your own unique voice, which can tell your story like no one else can. Abracadabra, you will speak and create. Thank you.